Hello, beautiful community. The tyrant in the Kremlin has said that he prefers Biden to win the 2024 US election. What is going on here? Let's break this down because we're going to end up in a conversation about Russian interference in our democracies over the next few months. We're going to be talking about how real it is, what it looks like, what effect it has, what it's motivated by. And Putin saying that somewhat forces us, I think, into a little bit of a conversation about where we are at with this today. There was a lot of incredible juice in that interview, kind of positively speaking for us, because Putin, in this interview in which he said that Biden would be his preference for 2024, also pushed several of the really destructive things he could have said to a Western audience in his Tucker Carlson interview, but didn't. Now, I don't want to over milk that because I want to focus on this supposed endorsement of Biden and explore with you how far it's a lie and what exactly is going on behind that language as political technology deployed for purposes that the Kremlin has. So let me just infinitesimally quickly mention what he got up to in two destructive moves he made. The first destructive move he made was to say that Western politicians are the enemies of Western citizens. And the second move he made was in the middle of pointing out that modern-day Germans are not politically responsible for the crimes of the Nazis. He went on to say that nevertheless, in the West, there are ideologies which emphasize the specialness and exclusivity of groups, and that these ideologies, he claimed, are dangerous and are how Nazism starts. So what he's doing there is attacking the incarnation of identity politics in the West. We've got to be extremely careful here because we're not going to go into this today. We're talking about the endorsement of Biden. We've got to be careful because hyper-identity politics is a big democratic problem in the West, but the vast majority of the political attacks on it are themselves modes of anti-democratic authoritarian politics. So there's a counter-revolutionary wave coming against identity politics that is itself a threat to democracy. So that's why it's such a delicate conversation, which we'll continue to delve into more deeply, but I'm going to park it for today. There is something else I'm going to park, and that is the extraordinary issue of Biden's alleged cognitive decline. Putin was asked about it, and he said, again, pushing this agenda of normalization, we don't talk about it. We talk about decisions, positions, serious politics. Biden is probably fine, and I look at pieces of paper too, and forget things. So please, let's focus on what's real. And we'll come back to that too, because my background, not just as a political philosopher, but as somebody who's experienced significant cognitive decline, we're going to talk about exactly what's going on with Biden. And that too is really difficult to grasp because you've got two paradoxical things you've got to consider. That Biden has actually been spectacularly efficacious as a politician behind the scenes. That's not an endorsement of his positions. That's an endorsement of how effective he has been as a political operator. But presented to the world is for him now largely tarnished by very significant cognitive decline that's got worse, that's undermining his capacity to speak, to orientate in dialogical space. And that itself is a real problem for US democracy, even if Biden wins, because that front, no matter how effective stuff behind the scenes is just appallingly draining of trust at an historical moment when trust is already perilously low. Anyway, let's get to the core of what we need to talk about. I want Biden to win. Is this a lie? Is this partly true? Is it different to 2016? In any way, or are they taking a similar position to what Trump as they did then? What is going on? Well, let's break this down a little bit. Since 2014, it's been Kremlin policy to engage in the destabilization of Western democracies that were engaged in, back then, the much milder sanctions regime against Russia. So it's not conspiracy, it's basic political reality that the Kremlin's out to undermine our democracies. Indeed, the collapse of our democracies is Putin's theory of victory. Right? And I've made this case repeatedly in recent times on the main channel too. For instance, in the video about the possibilities of a conflict with NATO later in the 2020s. They're dependent on our decline for victory, right? So this isn't magical thinking, they're really up to this. Don't confuse this with the view that what they are doing is highly effective and decides what happens in our domestic politics, right? That would be a very unwise and a very damaging conclusion, because it would externalize things that are overwhelmingly a product of domestic politics to malign foreign interference. And then you would end up in a position of going around calling Trump voters foreign agents. And that would be a very destructive sort of ideological self-capturing that you would do to yourself. It wouldn't be an effective way of being a citizen. So yeah, it's the Kremlin project to interfere. But there are differences between 2016 and 2024. In 2016, they wanted to lean into Trump to make a big mess. They didn't want Trump to win, partly because I didn't think he could. So for them, the idea wasn't to support Trump over Hillary, but to make Hillary's victory fraught, toxic, to make it take place in an, unprecedentedly divided and conflictual and toxic political space. In 2024, they want Trump to win. So there is a difference. Trump is not just a wrecker, like he was for them in 2016. In 2024, they clearly want Trump to win. Now, is Putin just telling a white lie, or is there a little bit of gray in the lie there? I think there's a little bit of gray. Namely, they think that whatever happens in Western democracies, they're going to be declining. Now, I believe that we are experiencing democratic decline that is very significant. But that's not what the Kremlin thinks. The Kremlin has a kind of reverse Fukuyamian view of this, whereby they think that our decline is genuinely inevitable and genuinely imminent. And that is a matter of faith rather than empirical observation on their part. So they have that position as a kind of dogma, really. So they think that whatever happens, we're going down. Now, they might also think that Biden is really bad optically in a democracy that is in crisis. I mean, he does not look like he is the solution to a democracy that's in crisis and needs a refresh. So they think there'll be plenty of damage to American democracy if Biden gets a second term. And they'll be happy to go with that and wait and see what that leads to as well. However, there is another factor, and that is that they genuinely believe that Biden is a highly experienced, highly mature, predictable, measured political actor, and that gives them a certain kind of advantage, namely that they can take sole proprietorship over this podium of unpredictable escalation. Now, the Kremlin are a bit nuts. They do have mystical visions about world history. But they also play at being nuts. It's an important Kremlin tool. Fear us, we're crazy. And that's an easier card to play. This card of unpredictability is easier for them to play with Biden. And they were certainly saying that around the time of the 2016 election, when that more stable candidate for them would have been Hillary. But while they have genuine reasons to prefer Biden, they are, in this case, outweighed by their preference for Trump. And there was something else I haven't mentioned. They are intimidated by Trump's unpredictability as well. They feel burned by Trump's first term, partly because it was way more hawkish toward Russia, in their view, than they had anticipated. Partly because Trump had failed to form an elite around him and got co-opted. And that is actually an analysis of Trump's first term that Putin shares with Trump and with me. And I invite us to recognize that as a reality, that Trump is a lone actor who lacks the political skills to form an elite around him. That's to say, he does not have the political chops of an Orban or a Putin. That's to our advantage. But Trump knows that this was a problem, and he may try to make it less of a problem the second time round. But the Kremlin don't have any views about that, and they think that he could be co-opted again, and they think it's possible that he could be both unpredictable and a lot less Russia-friendly than some people hope. So there is also this factor of unpredictability. So these are the reasons to prefer Biden. He'll speed up the decline of US democracy anyway, they think. He's going to be measured and predictable, which will allow them to play this look at us, we're nuts, don't mess with us role. And 3, they're scared of Trump's unpredictability. But for all of these, despite all of this, they prefer Trump to win clearly and by far. They have the highest confidence that he will do far more damage than any alternative to US democracy. And they're really keen on that. And they think of that more. You see, I think you might be sitting there and thinking, oh, they want Trump to just cut off support for Ukraine and undermine NATO. Sure. But for the Kremlin, an even more big picture view is, let's have US democracy disappear. I mean, that'll make things a lot easier. And they're focusing on that as much as on particular questions of how much support Ukraine's going to get. So I am calling out that statement by Putin as a bit of political technology. I think it is deceptive, intentionally deceptive. And I think that it's even part of the purpose of saying that itself will help Trump. And Trump has received the thing Putin said gladly. He said, well, thank you very much. I'm glad he thinks I'll be a challenging opponent for him. And you could easily imagine them making private joke about that when they meet. So that's basically my analysis. They do clearly hope that there is an outcome of a Trump victory, which is different to how they approached 2016. That's qualified by all the things we've put on the table, but nevertheless, they do have a candidate they favor. That's my analysis for today. Thank you so much for being with me. Talk soon.